In a recent World Economic Forum survey, respondents rated corruption as the second most problematic factor for doing business in India, with 78% very clearly saying their companies are highly vulnerable to corruption. In 2007, when British telecom giant Vodafone entered the Indian market, then CEO Arun Sarin described India as a tremendously exciting, fast-moving market. 5 years on, the MNC has had a tax bill of around 14,000 crore rupees slapped on it, fines worth hundreds of crores for allegedly entering into pacts with competitors, and as some of its licenses come up for renewal, the government has hiked fees manifold. Martin Peters, chief executive of Vodafone India in 2011, described India with these words, and I quote for you, "There are new hurdles every day, and they, that's policymakers, can change the rules of the market as you are playing it. If you don't have the stomach for that, please don't come." Unquote.
But they do come, and despite the hurdles, they stay. And that's because the market opportunity is large. So despite Vodafone's battle with the government, India as a standalone market delivered the highest revenue and EBITDA growth amongst all European, African and Asia-Pacific markets. It is the potential and promise of growth which keeps companies from walking out.
You need an iron stomach right now to get through this. And one of the hardest jobs is that of the country manager in India. How do you keep the confidence and the interest of the global CEO and keep the investments continuing to come and so forth?
That's exactly what we're going to find out on this episode of Conquering the Chaos. We talk to country managers across industries to find out what it takes to find one's equilibrium in this tightrope walk of managing corruption and dealing with volatility.
India is not complex, it's just different.
By and large, India is a business-friendly environment. And there will be costs of doing business, there will be issues in doing business, but we have to sort of find our ways, find a way to navigate.
Because governance structure has not kept pace, not always is policy clear, not always are interdepartmental, interministerial and departmental issues get resolved.
With the GDP growth also slowing down and also business sentiment being really difficult, it's put everybody on a bit of a cautious note.
Ravi Venkatesan, in his book Conquering the Chaos, lays out a taxonomy of corruption in India. Venkatesan says his definitions might be unpalatable and controversial, but that's because they represent a reality that's perhaps too close for comfort. And the EY FICCI survey released earlier this week illustrates why. Of the respondents who represented a mix of Indian enterprises and US and UK-based MNCs with revenues between 5,000 crores to 10,000 crore rupees, 50% said that unwillingness of firms to do things the right way was responsible for corruption.
Other key findings from the survey also hint at the joint culpability of corporations and the government, which has resulted in 36,400 crore rupees being lost to graft in just the last 12 months. Now, 50% of the respondents say their company has lost business because of unethical practices of competitors. 67% say they've given gifts to government officials. 89% feel inadequate enforcement of laws is adding to the malaise of bribery, and 44% of all executives were actually in favor of legalizing what they call facilitation payments in India.
And shades of this reality came through in our interviews with India country managers of MNCs as well.
Our experience has been that if you provide data and continue to ensure a follow-up with additional data being constantly provided relevant to the context, there may be delays, but there are seldom denials. Yes, have we experienced delays? We have. But it's never been a denial at the end of the day. But we remain constantly engaged, providing information as to why we should get the requisite clearance for continuing business.
Any multinational will be as much guilty of catering to the speed money concept as would be people who actually are fed speed money. So you have to, as a good corporate citizen, while it may sound a bit cliched what I'm saying here, you have to restrict it, if not obviate it totally as a multinational coming into India. Build that into your cost. Look at India as a much larger opportunity, not something where you have some shortcuts and you can start your businesses earlier. The temptations are always there. But to be a good corporate, and there are enough examples now coming up, and more there will be highlight on this, that if you try to kind of take these shortcuts, things will catch up with you, and somewhere you may have to pay the price for it.
But for India joint venture partners, the complexity takes on a more difficult turn because of the consequences of violating laws at home, such as the UK Bribery Act and the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or the FCPA.
One of the first things I learned when I got into the McDonald's business was what FCPA stands for, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And clearly, for businesses with ethics, this is something that you just got to put your foot down to. We have obviously faced these issues. What we find is, however, when you take a tough stand, first few times it becomes really difficult because, then you get served notices and then you have to deal with it. But finally, if your fundamentals are right, so for example, when we talk of food law, we've taken all our approvals from CFTRI in the past. We made sure that we meet the specs of the local regulation. And if that's that, eventually you will win. And what happens is, over time, people realize that this is not a company that's willing to it'll go to any length in terms of protecting itself legally rather than dealing with speed money. So I think over time, it is something that companies can deal with.
Another MNC that's had an up again, down again India ride is the world's largest retailer, Walmart. The year 2012 was a bad year operationally for Bharti Walmart, with the company incurring a negative cash flow from operations of 533 crore rupees. To make matters worse, in November of the same year, Walmart launched an internal investigation into bribery charges in Mexico, India, China and Brazil. Soon came the disclosures on Walmart's alleged lobbying with US senators on multiple issues, including gaining wider access to the Indian market. This caused a storm in the Indian Parliament, and a committee was appointed to investigate the matter. The inquiry conducted by the panel remained inconclusive. But meanwhile, heads have rolled at Bharti Walmart. Head of India Operations Raj Jain has moved on. So have heads of asset protection, legal and support services. Some of the retailer's new projects have also been put on hold.
You need somebody who's got courage, because every day if you're in a market like India, you're going to be tested, okay? And so the country head has to be someone who's capable of taking tough decisions, who will do what is right, not what is convenient. And the final thing I would really look for is something I call learning agility. And learning agility is basically a person's ability to adapt to a new situation. Okay, so if you're put into a situation you've never faced before, are you completely paralyzed by it and devastated by it, or do you learn to figure it out and then succeed? If you're a country head in India, you have to deal with strikes, you have to deal with bunds, you have to deal with bureaucrats, you have to deal with policies that change, the tax code will change, your headquarters will have unreasonable demands, all sorts of things. And yet you have to deliver the numbers quarter after quarter. So it takes a very different type of person, somebody who's tenacious, resilient, never gives up in order to succeed at these kinds of jobs.
CEOs that we spoke to say that it's perhaps time that Indian policymakers take a more mature approach towards lobbies and lobbying, which in most parts of the world is a legalized process.
To me, lobbying is a good thing because if you work in tandem with the associations in the industry, then it really brings better out of the government, good policies. It enhances our technology upgradation across the industry. It gives you a platform to share common practices and values. in the country as well.
Lobbying, as is done by trade associations, that is putting up policy points for inputs to the government for sectors, be it mining, telecom, aviation, infrastructure. I think that is absolutely fine. What I think should be discouraged is if it goes down to either the individual company or an individual per se. That must be severely discouraged.
But perhaps the last word in this debate must go to Vikram Bakshi, joint venture partner of McDonald's in India. He believes the best way to tackle the cancer of corruption is to create a work structure that reduces the interaction between business and government.
We have to work with the government to minimize the interaction that one has with the government departments. The more we can use technology to help us in terms of making bookings through websites, applying for your license through websites, providing all the necessary requirements that are there as a part of it, and the government stating very clearly that if within by this time the thing is not decided, it's automatically considered to be either accepted or rejected, right? The lesser the problem one is expected to have. And I think I must say that the governments have been moving towards that. For example, the Delhi government, now you can actually apply for your license or renewal on the website. 2, they're giving 3 years licenses, so your interaction is limited with this thing. And I think those are things that we would urge the state governments to continue doing so that businesses can be established much quicker, and which will help both in terms of employment and revenues for the government.
But easing procedures is just one part of the task before the government. The other is designing policies on things like tax and FDI and then staying the course. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, we've witnessed perhaps the worst examples of policy flip-flops, exacerbated by inaction on key matters on one hand and rampant corruption on the other. How does this impact an MNC doing business here and those that are actually waiting on the sidelines, waiting to get in? That's on the other side of this break. Keep watching Conquering the Chaos.
We also need to understand the lay of the land, how this country is designed, and make sure that based on that lay of land, you define your priorities in the country.
We are here in India not because of a short-term profit. We are here because of our long-term plan. And whenever the break-even is coming, then it's coming.